What's going on, everybody, and welcome back. Today we're diving deep into the third episode of It, Welcome to Derry. So far, this has been a fun experience back into the terrors and the mysteries of Derry, but there's also been some truly interesting creative choices. Now, the title of this episode, which is Now You See It, is a very fitting title because this episode pulls back the curtain on some of the more fascinating elements of It's mythology as we get closer and closer to everyone's favorite dancing clown. But if I'm being honest, some things in this episode left me scratching my head. With that said, grab your slingshots and let's unpack everything that this episode had to offer. Full spoilers ahead. We open in 1908 at a fair in Derry. We're introduced to a young Francis, a kid who's about to be introduced to a new fear. He's talked into going into the Hall of Freaks and Curiosities, home of the acts from the likes of Ape Man, Dog-Faced Boy, Skeleton Man, and the Lee Twins. Now, off in the distance, Francis notices a child holding bright red balloons dressed as a clown. Now, I know we're going to eventually meet Bob Gray, but I wonder if this is his child, and by his child wearing this outfit, was this early inspiration for it to becoming Pennywise. Now, you notice as the announcer speaks,
"Step right into a grotesquerie of horrors beyond your darkest imaginings. Step right up."
It was almost like if Francis was being guided, compelled by some unseen supernatural force. The way the announcer spoke reminded me of how Pennywise would say,
"Well, float down here. Yes, would you?"
As he's ushering Francis closer, time seems to stretch, to slow down, building to this dread. Now inside is not just the bizarre exhibit of the Lee Twins that catches his eye. He sees what binds the Lee Twins together, and then he notices a man lurking in the back as curiosity pulls him in. In the darkness, we catch a glimpse of a person's back muscles cracking and shifting, as a voice, or better yet a whisper, begs Francis to come closer. Then the skeleton man lights a match. And there it is, his face, as he's missing his teeth and his eye is missing out of one of his eye sockets. As he utters the line that gives this episode his name, as we watch as Francis understandably runs out of the tent in fear. Now outside, Francis' dad has won him a slingshot that will later end up saving his life. As they leave the fair, we get our last look at the kid's face who's dressed up as a clown with their horn, and again, I wouldn't be surprised if this is Bob Gray's child. Now we did get some fun Easter eggs I want to point out from this sequence. Did you all notice what the targets were in the ball tossing game? It was one of a clown, but also a turtle. A subtle nod to the cosmic battle between it and Matern the turtle. And the piano player with the cigarette that had a smirk on his face, that was no other than Andy Muschietti himself, the director and producer of this series, a fun little cameo. Now on their way home from the fair, Francis' dad's car breaks down. Now while he fixes the car, Francis is sent to get him some water from the kids on the side of the road. Now Francis' dad didn't give him enough money to cover the water, but the young girl who's giving out the water notices that he has a slingshot as he gives it to her to cover the rest. Now as time passes, we see Francis and the young girl's friendship has grown. One day while playing outside, Francis runs into the woods. Now the girl warns him not to go into the woods, but he's too lost in his own world and having too much fun, and when he looks back, he notices that she's no longer chasing after him as he's wandered too far into the woods. And this is where he sees him, the skeleton man. But he's no longer a man. As he's changing, shifting, and growing, it has transformed into Francis's real fear. Now running for his life from it, who's now transformed into Francis's newfound fear of the skeleton man, we watch as its body elongates and eventually transforms into a creature and chases after him. Now after falling down and now coming face to face with Francis and about to kill him, Rose uses a slingshot and wounds the creature as they run away, and will later discover that she ended up saving Francis's life. Now this whole opening scene taking place in 1908 is extremely important. Now for those of you all that aren't aware, the timelines in the Stephen King novel of It and the recent films and this show in particular different in years. Now the reason I'm bringing that up is because Rose uses that slingshot to wound it, effectively slowing it down. Now the blood we saw in this scene looked very similar to when the Losers Club fought against it in the kitchen as well as in the sewers in 2017 It, which if you all remember was towards its hibernation season when it's at its weakest. Now, despite the timeline differences, I believe major book events are already in motion here. For example, the Kitchener Ironworks tragedy, which in the books happened in 1906, is likely close to the proximity to this 1908 scene. Again, to me, this suggests that it might not have been in its prime, weakened by its hibernation cycle, and with the young girl displaying confidence against it, that explains why they managed to escape. Now, this is where things get really interesting. The plan for this series is to have 2 more seasons, each set 27 years before the last. This means that our 1908 setting is actually where season 3 would be placed. The 3rd season will most likely showcase the horrific Kitchener Ironworks event. Again, in the books, this happened in 1906, but in this timeline, it will most likely happen in 1908, where the ironworks exploded, killing 108 people, and unfortunately, 88 of them were children who were out doing Easter egg hunting. Again, this event could be seen in the opening credits of the show, and it is a truly devastating event that a future season, season 3, would undoubtedly build towards. Now, I have to be honest with you all, let's talk about the Skeleton Man scene. While I've enjoyed the creature designs in the previous episodes, for example, the mutated baby, Ronnie's rebirth, Lilly's pickle nightmare, but when it comes to it in the form of Skeleton Man, it just didn't work for me. Personally, I didn't find it scary, and also visually speaking, the CGI just didn't look good. And as the first episode not directed by Andy Muschietti, who directed episodes 1 and 2, this made me wonder if things were going to shift. And not necessarily in a good way. We'll discuss another CGI moment later in this episode that didn't quite land for me a little bit later in the breakdown. But despite my personal critiques, what did you all think about the look of the Skeleton Man and this being a first glimpse into season 3? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Now at the infamous Juniper Hill Asylum, we find Lilly's mom is finally there to pick her up after what I believe was just a few days. The doctor informs Lilly's mother that he recently upped Lilly's chlorpromazine doses. Now the doctor also mentions putting Lilly on a more restrictive treatment plan if things don't get any better. I'm betting that won't be the last time we hear of this new restrictive treatment plan. Now my prediction is, I bet this new treatment the doctor was speaking of will be put to use at some point, maybe even after Lilly experiences what happens to her at the end of this episode, after she maybe shows her mother or other the pictures taken that will land her back in the asylum. Now, despite the asylum's bad reputation and Lilly's hatred for being there, we see a silver lining, and that's her bond with the head of housekeeping. Now, Lilly had befriended her the summer before, and this kind woman truly understands her. As it appears, Lilly has told her everything, from what's going on with Ronnie, her terrifying supernatural experiences in the theater, as well as in the grocery store. And the housekeeper believes her. Now, she gives Lilly advice that really motivates her to making things right with Ronnie, as she gives her back her lucky bracelet.
If you tell me that you've seen the impossible, then I believe you. Most people, well, they only believe what they can see. With their own eyes.
Again, I have a strong feeling Lilly will be back at the asylum at some point this season, and that treatment might be indeed used on her. Now, if that ends up happening to Lilly, I can see her adult friend being a key ally, perhaps even going as far as helping Lilly break out of the asylum if things truly get out of control with it. I also have a feeling that the head of housekeeping has had her own encounter with it at some point in her past. Maybe she was the nurse Pennywise attacks in one of the latest trailers of the show, and maybe she survives the attack. Or perhaps she knew the nurse, or like Rose and Shaw later in this episode, maybe she saw it herself when she was younger as a kid. This would perfectly explain her open-mindedness and willingness to believe Lilly. I could see her and the father she mentioned to Lilly in this scene being pivotal figures in season 2, which would be set in 1935, offering more historical context and resistance against it. Now at the police station, we watch as Chief Clint Bowers is attempting to grill Hank about his whereabouts the night the kids were killed in episode 1. Bowers tries the good old cop routine, making small talk about Hank's favorite cigarettes, but he also talks about how he has the ability to sniffing out a liar miles away. He then presses Hank even more, claiming an eyewitness saw him near the theater that night. Now, Hank, of course, denies the claim, but after revealing his favorite cigarette brand to Bowers, that exact brand was found at the scene, making it look like Hank was there. He reminds Hank of the treatment kid killers receive at Shawshank, yet Hank remains firm. He wasn't there. Now, we the audience know Hank is innocent, but we also know that Bowers was basically told to frame Hank if he wanted to be reelected. Now, obviously, the cigarette findings is obviously manufactured evidence. Of course, Hank would have an old pack of cigarettes at the theater somewhere because he works there. It's not much evidence, but unfortunately, being a black man in 1960s in Derry is all the evidence they need. We don't see Hank or Bowers for the rest of this episode, but figuring out a way to free Hank quickly becomes the kids' main focus and objective in this episode. Now, speaking of the kids, we head to the school where Ronnie is facing her own torment. Kids are making fun of her situation, pranking her by putting on her locker "Hatchet Hank's Gonna Fry" in bright red letters. Now, in the bathroom, struggling to wipe off the red lipstick, we see Lilly arrives. Despite her recent asylum stay and Ronnie literally threatening to whoop her ass, we see Lilly extends an olive branch, handing Ronnie some alcohol to clean up. Now, Lilly tells Ronnie what happened at the grocery store and how she saw it as her father, and she says that she is now willing to do whatever it takes to clear her father's name, regardless of how crazy it might make her look. Her idea is to use a camera to capture it on film. But first, they need to find someone who can help them develop it. Now, in General Shaw's office, we get the confirmation that the mysterious car found in the final scene of last week's episode did indeed belong to the Bradley gang. Now, we talked about who they are in my opening credits breakdown last week, but for those who don't remember, as Fuller summarizes in this scene. In the book, the event happened in 1929, but as we have established earlier, the book and the newer film's timelines are different. As the story goes, George, his brother Al, and the crew of bandits were brutally gunned down by several Derry citizens in an ambush shooting. And some of those civilians recalled seeing Pennywise, which again is seen in the opening credits and is what is known as the Bradley Gang Massacre. Now, this is our first time hearing adults speaking openly of it as an entity that it is and what it's capable of. This scene also confirms that the United States government does plan to weaponize it, which is such a terrible idea. We also get the first real confirmation of what they're actually using Hallorann for. Now, Shaw assigns Hallorann to his next mission with the help of Hanlon and an old item from Shaw's past that can guide him into finding what they're looking for. Now, speaking of Hallorann, he's now airborne with Russo and Hanlon under Fuller's orders using his shine abilities to pinpoint it. Now, the item said to help him is a slingshot that the young girl used in 1908 to injure it in the woods, as we get to see Hallorann use his shining ability to give them directions. Now, before Hallorann's vision quest begins, we briefly flash back to 1908, showing us the little girl and Francis successfully escaping its pursuit in the woods.
Why can't it leave the woods?
Can you keep a secret?
Now, while we don't hear the secret on screen, based on the setting and the events to come, it's safe to assume who this young girl turns out to be later as Rose has ties to the local Native American tribes. The tribes who, in the 2019 film, used the ritual of Chud, serving as a way of temporarily defeating it and containing it. As I predicted last week, Rose's knowledge of Derry will prove to be key. She is the historical anchor confirming that it has been fought and temporarily confined before. Again, this 1908 storyline and Rose's role in it is clearly setting up the foundation of everything we can expect in Season 3 of It, Welcome to Derry. Now, we get one of the best transitions of this show that we've seen so far as we flash forward to seeing that the little girl's face is revealed to be actually the adult version of Rose, who's currently in a meeting about the government digging up their ceremonial grounds. Now, this is where we officially meet the character who I believe name is pronounced Tennille, who we find out is Rose's nephew. He's the same character we saw observing the digging site in last episode, and he's clearly aware of its presence. Now, Rose implies that Tennille is very important, practically stating that he is needed to continue in the containment or defeating of it again. I would bet, like Hallorann, Tennille also has the shine, and he's going to play probably a major role in the rest of the season. Now, before moving on, a quick clarification on the actor who plays Tennille. Now, actor Josh Ojak, who plays Tennille, was also in the latest Stephen King adaptation, The Long Walk, where he played the character by the name of Holly Parker, also known as Number 48. Now, believe it or not, I have yet to see The Long Walk. I know, I've heard it's great, and I promise to watch it sooner rather than later, but I also haven't read the book, but I believe both the book and the film take place in the late 70s, making it impossible age-wise for this actor to be playing the same character in both stories. Now, while the timing is crazy, and yes, it's the same actor in a Stephen King project, he is playing two completely separate characters. Just want to clear that up for any confusion out there. Now back in the air, we get my favorite and most exciting sequence of this episode. As Russo and Hanlon are worried as Hallorann becomes completely unresponsive while using the shine. As they contact the base, Hallorann mentally has walked straight into its lair in the sewers. Everything about this scene was incredible to me, as we see Hallorann sees the same stage set from It Chapter 1, where Pennywise did his iconic dance for Beverly. But here, we get the biggest moment. As the door opens, we see its eyes yet again like we saw last week, and if I'm not mistaken, we officially hear Bill Skarsgård's voice for the first time this season as he asks Hallorann,
Who are you?
Now, looking in its eyes, Hallorann is hit with a vision. It starts at a New Orleans party and quickly switches to soldiers dying on the battlefield, and we can notice a woman in the background. Now, understanding the shine ability, we know that that was most likely another person's traumatic experience or a memory that it was displaying to Hallorann. Maybe it was a past memory of Hallorann himself. As we watch Hallorann snaps out of the vision, he looks up to find all of its victims floating in the sewer. Now, one body descends to warn Hallorann to leave, and it's his grandmother. Now, in the books, not much is known of Dick Hallorann's early life, except that he was likely born in New Hampshire. Now, as little boy, as mentioned in this episode later, it's also mentioned in the books that he had conversations with his grandmother without either one of them moving their mouths, basically implying that she most likely had the ability to shine as well, and it was passed down to him. Now, again, that vision of New Orleans and the war and seeing his grandmother, all these things I believe will be seen again, and we're going to get more context about what exactly it means. Now, back in the real world, this vision almost kills Hallorann, thinking he's escaping the sewers from it, but in reality, he's opening the hatch to the back of the aircraft, almost stepping out until Hanlon pulls him back in, saving his life. Now back on the base, General Shaw checks in on Hallorann, who confirms that he saw it, or more accurately, it saw him. Now we watch as Hallorann tries to warn Shaw about what they're doing.
It wasn't supposed to see us. It wasn't supposed to know.
Basically, Hallorann saying that they're poking the bear and this could lead to something terrible happening and they should just leave it alone. Now, Shaw takes that information and simply smiles and tells him to rest up as he walks away. Now, this confirms Shaw's cold, calculated motivation. He doesn't really care about the risk, he cares about the prize. Now, Hallorann warning Shaw about something terrible happening most likely is a black spot, which again, if you guys don't remember, is the devastating fire and destruction we discussed back in episodes 1 and 2, proving Shaw's actions have catastrophic consequences. Now, checking back in with the kids, we see Rich and Will are buddying up, sharing burgers at a diner where Lily's mom works at. Now we see Will sharing stories about space and Rich talking about his crush on Marge as they're interrupted when Lilly and Ronnie arrive wanting their help. Knowing how smart and intelligent Will is, Ronnie needs his expertise to help develop the film from the picture they plan to take of it. We watch as Rich and Will discuss the plan, and Will says that he believes Ronnie believes what she saw. Rich calls out Will's romantic interest in Ronnie as the main reason why he wants to help her. This makes me wonder if the show will make a change from the books and have Will and Ronnie have a long-term relationship and he ends up marrying her instead of the character who in the book goes by the name of Jessica. I mean, the show doesn't include Will's 6 siblings, and what happens to Will is completely different than what happens to him in the books. And there are plenty of other changes that the 2017, 2019, and this show have made, so it's clearly not out of the question for this prequel series to change things up. Now, speaking of young love, but this time with a hidden agenda, we cut to Rose's antique shop where we see a 50-year reunion between 2 old friends. It's here that the show reveals that the boy, Francis, who Rose saved from the skeleton man back at the start of the episode, was indeed the young version of General Shaw, which explains his knowledge of it and using the slingshot for Hallorann to find it. Now, Shaw shares a story with Rose, and it's something that we've seen in both the books and the films. He tells her he doesn't remember anything about the time he spent the summer in Derry when they were 12. As we actually flash back to that moment where young Francis tells Rose that he's leaving Derry, and we watch as Rose gives him back his slingshot. She even warns him that he'll forget her, forget Derry, and forget everything about the summer. Now, this loss of memory after leaving Derry is a key element in King's work. It's not just about childhood events fading, it actively makes people forget. Think about that scene in the film when the Losers Club reunites for the first time in It Chapter 2 at the Chinese restaurant. That's the lingering effect of its manipulation. It's like a supernatural amnesia, but it's also a powerful metaphor for how we, as humans, often suppress or even let fade the most significant, even traumatic memories from childhood, especially when faced with something as terrifying and otherworldly as this entity known as it. Now back in the present, Shaw only remembers Rose because of her name being brought up in the cease and desist letter related to some of the government digging sites. Now he spins a story about what the government's up to, but he's clearly not telling the whole truth. But still, he promises Rose that she can trust him and wants to work together. Now, the agenda at hand for both characters are they both get something out of each other while also reconnecting at the same time. Shaw must have had remembered the secret she told him as kids about it, and she wants to know what the government is looking for. Now, the question is, will Shaw use Rose like he's using Hallorann as a means to an end, or will Rose somehow manage to get through Shaw and convince him that trying to weaponize it for his career is a colossal and potentially catastrophic mistake? Now back with the kids, Lilly takes them to the old crew's hangout spot at the top of the tower where they come up with a plan to drawing it out. Rich shares family traditions to conjuring evil spirits, as they set their sights on visiting the Derry cemetery to take action in trying to capture the picture they need to show proof of its existence. At the Hanlon's house, Leroy invites Hallorann over to get an understanding of his special abilities. Now at the dinner table, Charlotte shares her past as a history teacher, but also her time as an activist during the civil rights movement, as we see her husband disapproves of this because of his aspirations to moving up in the service. Now Hallorann doesn't know Hanlon is trying to figure him out as he accidentally slips up by mentioning Will's name, but the thing is, Hanlon never mentioned that he had a son to Hallorann. Now outside, Leroy gets straight to the point, asking Hallorann about the plane incident, and we see Hallorann shares exactly what happened.
My grandmama said it's like seeing things without seeing things. Yeah, I know. Sound crazy, right?
Leroy knew Hallorann was in the room that night when he was attacked. As he describes, he felt it, and it was the same unsettling, mind-reading sensation he felt at the dinner table when Hallorann mentioned his son. It was Hallorann using his shine. Now Hallorann promises to never probe Hanlon's mind again, as he realizes Hanlon's lack of fear is something he doesn't want to mess with, and after Hanlon saved his life, he'll rather have an ally he can trust in the trenches rather than someone that he can't. Now back with the kids. They're at the Derry cemetery attempting Rich's spirit conjuring ritual. But they eventually find out that he's no expert at conjuring spirits and mostly made up who he learned it from, as Lilly and Ronnie realize this was one big waste of time and we watch them leave. Now, I'm going to be 1,000% honest with you all. This next scene was as bad, if not worse, than a Skeleton Man to me, so let's just break it down. As Lilly and Ronnie leave the cemetery, we see a statue smiles at them. Headstones crack open, is complete chaos. Suddenly, they're seeing familiar ghosts, manifestations of its powers, including Teddy and Susie, who were recently murdered. Lilly manages to snap a photo of dead Teddy, but the camera gets snagged on a tree. Then we see little Susie wraps her arms around Will, sending him flying into the crypts. Now, amongst the flying ghosts, the camera is dropped and picked up multiple times in the scene. Now the camera ends up where Will is, as the others already flee the cemetery. Now Will hears something in one of the crypts as he sees a hand, it's its hand, but we see he manages to snap a picture before escaping to safety with the others. So what didn't I like about this scene? Man, where do we begin with this Scooby-Doo meets Goosebumps meets Are You Afraid of the Dark Tubi edition scene? Now, I'm obviously joking, calling it all that, but seriously, what the hell was going on in this scene? Now, I know this is where some of you all might disagree with me, and that's okay. That's why we're here to talk about it. But similar to how I felt about the Skeleton Man scene at the beginning of the episode, the CGI of the ghost and everything going on with the ground cracking and all that, I say this with all due respect in the world to the designers and the artists who I know this is a massive undertaking to create all these visual effects, but in my eyes, it looked bad and it really kind of pulled me out of the scene. And then there's the scare factor of the scene, or rather the lack thereof. It was executed in such a PG-rated style. The whole foggy, atmospheric setting, which should be building dread, felt overshadowed by these ridiculous, almost cartoonish giggles from the ghost of Susie. And then the whole drop on the camera, while it's a classic trope to create chaos, here it just felt silly. Even with these incredibly talented young actors, their performances in the moment felt off as well, and it felt way too staged. As you can tell, for me, this sequence was easily the worst part of this episode, and honestly, by far, to me, the worst scare set piece we've gotten so far in the entire show. I found this to be interesting kind of thinking about it because this is technically the first time since Andy Muschietti took over the helm of the It franchise back in 2017, there hasn't been any other director that has had their hands on this IP. And look, I've been following Andy Muschietti for a while, and he has a very particular way about how he sets up his scares. And look, the director of this episode has had an incredible career in television and also in film. He's a great storyteller and knows how to capture those type of moments of scares that I know needed to be in this scene. And again, I know some people might enjoy the Skeleton Man and enjoy this chase sequence, but to me, it was just such a different vibe from what we've seen in the Andy Muschietti version of the story. And again, look, to be fair, I know Andy Muschietti isn't directing every single episode in the show. It was bound to happen that we're going to get different interpretations and different, sensibilities from different directors. But out of the gate so far, again, this being the first director since 2017 of Andy Muschietti that's not Andy Muschietti to direct something from It. But again, compared to the other sequences we've gotten so far in the context of these first 3 episodes, the Skeleton Man and the chase sequence with the ghost just didn't land for me. But it's not all negative. Even in the scene that didn't work for me, there are still some threads to pull. And speaking of threads, let's talk about Will. This kid is brilliant. I'm really hoping that now that he's witnessed firsthand the supernatural abilities of It, he's finally going to tell his dad or his mom what he saw. And in doing so, I believe will not only validate his own experiences, which connects to what's going on with Leroy and what's going on at his job, but this could potentially clear Hank's name and let his father know that a black man is falsely being accused of murder. Now, let's talk about the ghost that we saw of Teddy and Susie. Remembering Lilly's scene in the grocery store in last week's episode, and I'm talking about the cereal box moment. Now, if you all remember, they showed us the dead faces of Susie and Teddy. Now, looking back at it, it was actually pretty clever foreshadowing for what we saw in this episode, even though I didn't like the scene. But this does raise a big question. Why didn't we see Maddie's face or Phil's face decaying on those cereal boxes? Now, I've spoken my truth about how I feel Maddie is still alive somewhere in Derry, even though I know I'm standing alone on an island with that theory. But now I'm seeing people are starting to suggest that Phil might also be alive. Reason being that his face wasn't on the cereal box and it wasn't decaying like we saw with Susie and Teddy's. And also bringing up the fact that where was Phil's ghost during that chase sequence? If they're truly gone, why not show their forms like we saw with Susie and Teddy? This is where I need you all's input in the comments below. Tell me where you all stand with this situation. Is Maddie alive? I still think so. Is Phil alive? I'm leaning towards no, because at least we saw him being tackled by the mutant baby, unlike what we saw with Maddie, where we just saw the pacifier flying out of the car. But hey, let me know what you all think in the comments below. Now, as we wrap up this episode, we head back to the school. They end up developing the pictures taken at the cemetery, and it's all starting to come together, as they now have the images of dead Susie and Teddy's spirit being used by It, but Will is the MVP because he got the money shot. While he was in the crypt, he managed to capture a photo of what grabbed at him, and it's a silhouette of a clown. This episode didn't just give us the voice of Pennywise, which was great by the way, but we also got a small glimpse of the clown at the end. Which means, ladies and gentlemen, that we are getting closer and closer to seeing everyone's favorite dancing clown in all his terrifying glory. The pieces are falling into place and the true horror is about to begin. Now, before we get into my overall thoughts of this episode, I need to notice in the comments below, if you were the kids in their current situation, who are you taking the photos to first? If you're Lilly, do you show it to your mom or do you show it to the head housekeeper? If you're Ronnie, do you show it to your grandmother in hopes to get Hank out of jail? If you're Rich, do you go to Marge and ask her on a date? If you're Will, do you go to your mom or do you go to your dad? Or do you go to the policeman and get them involved? Now, overall, despite the scares not working for me in this week's episode, I still enjoyed the character development that we're continuing to see. The kids are still great to me, and seeing all of them coming together really worked. Ronnie's still my personal favorite character so far, but I'm really loving what Will's got going on. Rich is a cool character, and Lilly remains to be the most tragic character in the show, and I really still enjoy her. I also enjoy the adults, which isn't something I normally like about the It story, especially when the adult version of the Losers Club isn't on the same level as the kid versions. But I like the adults in the story because they're doing practical things besides obviously the military trying to weaponize it. But I enjoyed seeing Leroy and Hallorann working together in this week's episode. The whole Rose and Shaw reveal worked for me. The story that's building up to everyone's favorite form of It, which is Pennywise, has really been working. With that said, I think that's a great place to end this week's breakdown of episode 3 of season 1 of It, Welcome to Derry. So, what do you all think about this third episode? What did you all think about the Skeleton Man and the chase sequence at the end? What did you think about all the character work we got in this episode, all the reveals we got in the episode, deeper meanings, Easter egg? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. Thank you all for watching or listening to this breakdown. Now, if you all have made it to this point in the breakdown, thank you for the support. I really can't thank you all enough. You are awesome. Do me a favor. The special word of the week to put in the comments right now is hashtag Now You See It. Now, if you all enjoyed yourself and enjoyed my breakdown and my coverage of this show, please remember to hit that like button. But also, if you're on YouTube, also hit the hype button for this breakdown. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, consider sharing this video to anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about this show just as much as we do. And more importantly, if you are having fun here, consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel where you'll get more videos about it, but also so many other videos from other shows and movies. So stick around and subscribe. Now, if you all are listening to this breakdown via podcast, I appreciate you listeners out there. Do me a favor, share the podcast, leave your thoughts about this episode in the comments below, but also stick around by subscribing to the podcast, leaving a rating, I would appreciate it, and review of the podcast. I would really appreciate that support. Alrighty, y'all, until next time, remember you all are awesome, stay safe out there, and please do not visit creepy cemeteries at night. Alrighty, y'all, I'll see you again soon.